Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer. Welcome to Wasteland Talks, my weekly talk show where I talk about whatever the hell I want. And this time we have a special spoiler talk episode of a review for Poor Things from director Yorgos Lanthimos, writer Tony McNamara, and starring Emma Stone. And I have one of my best friends, Haley, here to talk about this film because we both loved it. Haley, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you as always for having me. And this is the show where Shane gets to talk about whatever he wants, and then sometimes where I pressure him really hard to talk about something because I want to talk about it. And I will admit that I there was some pressure here for this one.
Well, it's you didn't have to push too hard, which also the funny thing is it is whatever I want to talk about with strong suggestions from people. Because I
If the
do,
passion is there.
well, that's the thing. I put it out there. If people have something they really want to talk about, and I'm down to talk about it, and I'm down to talk about Poor Things, because this is one of my favorite films this year, and it is continuing that trend of weird movies that might just blow up the Oscars and take a whole bunch of them. But Haley, what are your general thoughts on Poor Things?
So before we started this recording, I said I was going to try to rein myself in because like I am fired up about this movie.
Uh,
I have been talking to people about it. I saw it 6 or 7 days ago, and I've not stopped thinking about it. Like, it's one of those movies that won't stop just dancing around in your brain.
mhm.
And I think you're absolutely right that like it's weird. That's like if there's one word the many times I've spoken to people about this in the last 6 or 7 days, I've said, look, okay. It's weird, right? Okay, so it's weird, but you have to watch it. And then I go on and on and on. But yeah, it's really weird, and I love that about it.
What's so interesting is I know people who walked out of this movie.
I'm not surprised. Can I just tell you, Shane, I
Uh,
saw this movie with my dad, and I have a cool dad. My dad is like pretty darn cool. He's about as cool as you could be, where like it was not an utter catastrophe that I went to see this movie with my dad. But do not, I repeat, do not see this movie with your dad or your mom, unless your mom is a
so
raging feminist.
So my assessment of Yorgos Lanthimos's films are do not watch these with your parents, just period.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to see Killing of a Sacred Deer, and my mom invited herself along with me. And I told her, Mom, this is going to be weird. I don't think you're gonna like this. She invited herself anyway. Guess what? She didn't like it. It was weird. I would never watch this with my mother. But the a couple of adjectives just to throw out about this film. Obviously, weird. Horny is
Yeah.
definitely one that would describe this movie. Um, and idiosyncratic, I think, is a pretty clear one. Because here's the thing. If you really like Yorgos Lanthimos's films like The Lobster and The Favorite and Killing of a Sacred Deer and Dogtooth, you will enjoy this. Actually, this might be one of his most accessible movies, oddly enough.
Yeah. I would
Strangely,
I
it's
would say so.
also his least like nihilistic.
Yeah, because like if I may add some words, I also feel like this movie is in a way like utopian. And I
Mhm.
mean I said it's really feminist in
Yes.
my like my liberal arts like
Mhm.
student just like tore itself out. Like I was so I want to write essays about this movie, but even if you're not like that kind of person, I think it just really speaks to an alternate reality in which like certain constructs are possible and like a way of looking at the world is possible. And it's just a really like out around everything else, like an optimistic take on
Mhm.
something that you don't expect like normally when you get like weird kind of like off-kilter sci-fi type stuff, it's all about like the cautionary tale, what
Yep.
could go wrong. This is what could go right, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Which this film is so interesting in the fact that it's very obviously some form of adaptation of Frankenstein's story.
Hmm.
It's also Pinocchio in a lot of ways, as we have a protagonist who's basically a newborn
Hmm.
who's trying to process the world around them, which is Bella Baxter, played by Emma Stone. And so obviously this is spoiler talk, so jumping right in. She
Hmm.
tried to, well, she did kill herself.
Yes.
That's how this whole starts, is a woman jumped off of a bridge and killed herself. And Dr. Godwin Baxter, aka God.
I love that he's called God. It adds such a layer to the whole thing. It's like
Yeah.
one of my favorite parts of the whole thing.
And not only does it add like thematic layers, but it adds great comedy that
Yeah.
she's just casually like calling him
God.
God, and other people don't know who he's talking about.
He's the
And
only God in this movie, to be clear.
yeah, honestly. Um, and so she killed herself because she was pregnant with a child she didn't want to have with a complete psychopath who we meet at the end of the movie. And he, like Godwin, puts the baby's brain in the mother's body, and that is how we get Bella Baxter. And I have to say, Emma Stone gives one of my favorite performances, period. Not just in 2023, period. Because what she's able to do with this, the beginning of the film, she has to be a believable toddler.
Yes.
And the physicality is there, the speech patterns is there, the thought process is there. Like at one
The
point,
eyes, the
yeah,
empty eyes of just like, which is not easy to do.
no. And like Rami mentions liking something, and she's just like, and just chucks it at his face like a child would. And you see her progressing as like that teenage phase where she just wants to have sex all the time. Which one of the best lines in the trailer that I'm sure got a lot of people's like, why do people not just lay around and do this all the time? And then Mark Ruffalo's like, it's just like, yeah, we thought about it too. It's one of those kinds of things where she, like, everything is about her sexuality and her lust and her urges. And then
Mhm.
she's slowly growing through, like, she becomes a sex worker and learns a whole entire new perspective on the world through that, where sex isn't just like on demand pleasure for her, and she has to process how other people leverage it and men leverage it in
Hmm.
society. And then
Hmm.
by the end, like, and the I think the most interesting thing is how she walks progressively through the film. And
That's a
there's
big
just a
one.
moment where she storms out of the house towards the end and just this confident power walk going on. I'm like, yes.
The jerkiness is gone. Like
Yeah.
she's walking now. Yeah.
Yeah, and do that all the way up until the final shot where like she is taken over what Godwin has been doing, and she's in full complete control of her life and just loving life with her new goat human. But we'll
Yes.
get to that later. But
Yes.
just this
There's
whole entire process is fantastic. Jess, my wife, did get a little upset when she realized that this was super Freudian, because she goes from like the id to the ego to the super ego throughout, which Jess hates Freud, but like I feel like there's room for like sci-fi and fantasy to leverage that and stuff. Like one of my favorite sci-fi films, Forbidden Planet, is literally about a monster from the id. This movie came
Mhm.
out in the 50s. Of course, they were leveraging Freud at that point, but like it's just interesting in that way. And just the progression of what Emma Stone's able to do as Bella Baxter. She's one of my favorite characters in any movie this whole entire year. Too, I
Yeah.
loved her. She was so great.
Yeah, and I think like you can get hung up on any one of the many like
Mhm.
I, I want to say like lenses through which to view this movie. Like I feel like Frankenstein is like there. I
Yeah.
like the Pinocchio. There's also like not to get like deep into liberal discourse, but something that I like just got really fixated on as I was pondering this movie is also there's this like really radical feminist from like the 80s. Her name was Donna Haraway, and she wrote this thing called the Cyborg Manifesto, which was in essence using the idea of the cyborg,
Mhm.
meaning a partly natural and partly bionic or unnatural, inherently blasphemous like combination as a way to sort of imagine like a post gender and like hyper feminist reality. And this is like very deep in the weeds, but the thing that again just like fires me up about this movie is went back and reread like a chunk of the Cyborg Manifesto because I was like, I kind of feel like this is like what she was getting at a little bit. Like these things, a lot of these ideas are they're lofty and they're impossible to like hold on to. But what this movie does, which I think is like not only enjoyable but also like really special, is it takes things that I think most of us never really saw play out in a movie in such an effective way and like made them play out. Like the cyborg is not born, it is created.
Mhm.
It's this thing that is, and that's where the blasphemy comes from, right? Because it is not born, and that's very anti, like, wasp, Christian capital, whatever.
Mhm.
And then because of that, it has options. Like it can exist outside of a lot of these spaces, these constructs that rein people in. And like Bella, the whole time, everything she does bumps up against every possible construct. And I love how this film also took place in this like old timey, like they didn't do it in the future. They did
Yeah.
it in a completely alternate reality that had a lot of like asynchronous things going on because then you're removing yourself from now. And you're not saying, well, this isn't possible. Well, that isn't possible. Look, this psychedelic surrealist world where they're living, where the sky looks like some kind of fever dream painting at all times, is its own world. And this stuff is possible. And like, just go through this with her and realize how arbitrary so many of the things we take so seriously are. Because if you are this thing that was like created by this blasphemous god instead of the actual god, you were created, you're a monster, but you then get to just go and live like on your own terms. She's not a woman at all. Like she's what she wants to be, and she utilizes her womanhood in certain situations, but in others she absolutely rejects it. And like,
Mhm.
anyway, I'm gonna rein myself in again, sorry.
No,
But
it's okay. It's
there's so
I
much.
appreciate that because it's a really interesting perspective, and based off of your description, this really is exactly what this film is trying to portray
Yeah,
in a very weird but palatable way. Because
yeah, you can
that's
like get it even if you don't know what you're getting.
yeah. And this steampunk world is so fascinating that they create here. The production design is so cool and strange and oddly familiar, but also like not of this world kind of thing. The costuming is just impeccable. This if this doesn't clean up so many of those technical awards, I'm gonna be shocked. The most interesting thing, though, is the score
Yes, I was
that
hoping you would bring this up.
Jerkson Fendrix composed. is one of the most unnerving and strange and otherworldly kind of score I think I've ever heard in a movie,
Yeah,
where every musical beat that you would expect in a moment, it's just
it's
ever
off.
so slightly off, like
Yes.
off note, off
Yeah.
like not the instrument you would expect it to be.
Yeah.
And it fits this existence so well because that's Bella. She's
Hmm.
off. She's
Yes.
ever so slightly not what she's supposed to be.
She is not
And
in tune. She is not following the steps that you're supposed
no,
to follow.
and like if you watch the trailer, that's the music. And especially towards the end of the trailer, there's this big bang, like this
Yeah.
strange like note there, and you're just like, that sounds so off-putting but strange. And that's the whole score, is somehow slightly off-putting but makes sense in the film that you're watching. Robbie Ryan, who's the cinematographer, this is a gorgeous, gorgeous film in
Hmm.
the strangest of ways. Obviously, this film is fully aware of so many things before it. Like it, everybody saw in the trailer who watched the trailer, but like Duncan Waterburn, Mark Ruffalo's character, is such a pathetic human being. And that moment where she is so confident, she's learning, she's growing, she's doing her sex work, going to these classes, and she's standing up on her balcony. He's just like, Bella! Ah! This is the funniest thing ever. Just Mark
Where's my money?
Ruffalo
I
in
gave
this
away your
movie.
money. I gave it away.
Yeah. He is the funniest performance I think it him and Ryan Gosling as Ken are two
Yeah.
of the most committed comedic performances I've seen in any movie this whole entire year. And they're so committed to the bit that what's so hilarious though is Mark Ruffalo was so insecure about this performance, which this is so un Mark Ruffalo. Like like
I
Willem
haven't seen him stretch himself in anything like he did in that.
what's hilarious is I don't know if you've seen this, but Willem Dafoe pulled a prank on him on set because he
No.
knew that Mark Ruffalo was so insecure about his performance. He got Oscar Isaac, who was on the studio set
Hmm.
filming something else, to stop in and say hi. And he tricked Mark Ruffalo into thinking that Oscar Isaac was being recast at like they were gonna fire Mark Ruffalo and put him in the movie.
No.
which
No, he did such a good job.
which like I feel like this would be 100% something more I would expect Oscar Isaac to do.
Yes.
But the fact that it's Mark Ruffalo is so much better because you don't expect it. He is such an asshole. He is so fixated on the system that has created his comfortable life.
Yeah.
And Bella is just there to rip it all out from under him at every single turn. The way she talks to him, the way like
Yes.
he's so prim and proper, and when like the whole moment where she's just like, why would I leave it in my mouth if it's revolting?
Yeah.
Which hilarious. And then the woman across the table is like, oh, I've said that to him before, and you know exactly what you're talking about.
But she still has to say it outright.
Yeah, it just the whole dancing scene was hilarious. And like Mark Ruffalo's character Duncan is just at any turn ready to just start throwing hands with people. It's ridiculous. His whole entire dynamic with her. And he's the Italian like carnival guy from Pinocchio, 100%. He's the
Mm,
one who's trying to put her
yeah.
into his show and use
Hmm.
her exactly how he wants to use her. But unlike Pinocchio, she just like completely rips open his existence and makes him see like she doesn't have to go by his rules. And it's so fantastic. And the way she just like shoves him away when they're in
Yeah.
Paris is so great. And he is so pathetic. And it's absolutely hilarious
I
watching
feel
it.
like her transformation goes in one direction and his goes in the other. And
Mhm.
like it really like he in that movie runs the gamut of like so many phases of like insecure manhood. Like
Mhm.
and it just it's like you and like again like he captures it so brilliantly because it's just like archetypal, like in all these different moments where like he's angry but he also like cannot stand to be rejected, and so he has to keep
Yeah.
coming back and being like, well, we should get married, and she's like, what? Like,
No.
this was temporary, and he's like, oh, and like it's just
He's so dramatic. And what's so
yes.
fantastic is the whole like one of the biggest pushbacks of like people are against feminism and against racial equality and or homophobic, transphobic is that they feel like they have to give up so much for
Mm-hmm.
others to have equality when you know
Mm-hmm.
what? You don't. But
Yeah.
Duncan acts exactly how that mindset is because of what you said about she progresses and grows and gains power, and he self sabotages himself to be a pathetic hack who can't handle it. It's like,
Yes.
you could just go back to your crazy rich life and you'll be perfectly fine,
Right.
but
But
you won't let it go.
and I think it's because she, like you said, shatters everything he thought he knew about
Mm,
these things that he built his life on. Like, I'm desirable. I'm the experienced one. I'm the one who knows everything. I'm the one with the money. I'm the one with
yeah.
the power. And she doesn't give a crap about power. She doesn't give a crap about money. Once she finally figures out what it is, all she's trying to do is give it away because
Yeah.
she perceives that that's going to like somehow fix things, which is like we could have a whole other essay. That's a whole other essay. But it's just like it's beautiful. And then I think, contrasting Mark Ruffalo with both Willem Dafoe, who is like, again, I love that he's called God because he's this, and the fact that they make him a eunuch, I think that's so important that he's this like father figure who has no sexual inclinations in either direction at all.
Mm,
He's like neutral completely in this situation. And like he's purely the creator. And then he just like wants her to discover. Like he's
mm,
this very empowering being because like in the beginning of the film, I didn't know where things were going, and I made some assumptions about where it was gonna go, and I was getting kind of nervous. Especially about the dynamic that would like when they were laying together, I was like, no, don't do it.
mm.
But then like it wasn't, and that is so important that there was nothing like that. And then you have, her patient supporter who's just
Yeah.
following around taking notes, and he's like the perfect contrast to um Mark Ruffalo's
Yeah.
insane character.
Kept calling Max a king by the end of
Yes,
the movie.
he
It's,
is. He
he
fits into the construct, like he gets it, because he cared for Bella as she was. He met her as an equal. He didn't ask for things from her other than what two people should expect from each other in a relationship, which is affection, care, and like it's good because you see like the one side, but then it's like, look at Max. Be like Max.
yeah.
You know,
Well, and the way that he interacts when she finally comes back in the end and is like he's not offended that she used her body for her own pleasure and her own way of making money. He even made the comment that she was charging too less. She wasn't charging enough. It's like 35 seems way too low. And that
yes.
whole entire dynamic. and he like they're about to get married, and Chris Abbott's character comes strolling on in here, and he allows her supportively to go process this trauma that she needed to go process.
Hmm.
And he wasn't insecure about it. He's probably worried,
Oh
but the
yeah.
thing is, he like took it like an adult and allowed her to do this, which that whole entire sequence, I wasn't sure where the movie was going in that point, but that whole entire piece is so important
Yes.
because it reframes like that is the worst case scenario of what women have to deal with. And it's
Right.
no surprise that she wound up killing herself because of this person. And also the comeuppance that she gets with him, putting a goat brain in him. And one of the last things you see in this movie is him just like, meh, meh, which kudos to Christopher Abbott for completely committing to this character for like 20 minutes of the last end of this movie. But like he was so despicable and disgusting and like the worst of what men can be.
Yeah.
And she put him in his place and
Yep.
made him a
Yep.
goat. So,
It is so good. And like I think something that was poignant to me too is like both times when she leaves with
mhm,
these insane men who are not good news,
mhm,
they never stop her. They don't even come rescue her when
mhm.
she's abroad. She comes back when she is informed that God is dying.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason she comes back. And then she leaves again, completely of her own volition. And then she finds a way out of the situation. No one swoops in to rescue her. She gets
No,
out of it herself.
she's crafty.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, there was some conveniently placed, what was it, gin and chloroform?
Yes.
Everyone's
Oh
favorite
man.
cocktail.
That was a crazy scene. That whole entire sequence was nuts.
Yep.
Also interesting, two other characters. There's like three other characters that pop up in this film of significance. There's Martha, the older
Mm-hmm.
woman on the boat, who's just
Yes.
all about her living her best life. Martha's been living her best life for years, and just like, go girl, just like
Yes.
live your best life.
Those two, the two of them, they teach her such different things,
Mhm.
but they are such pivotal characters, I think, for her in terms of like role models, because Mark Ruffalo is everything
Yeah.
but both of them teach her like really important things about like life, and their interactions are just so loaded and nuanced, and I loved like they weren't in the movie for very long, but they were hugely important. And then obviously her courtesan compatriot was like a very like small but a very important role too.
Mhm.
These
And they
people
had
who
some
are
fun together.
important.
Which, not gonna lie. So I love the fact that like Martha has gotten to the point in her life where she's perfectly fine without the sex. And I feel like that's a really important lesson that Bella has to learn. If
Yes.
Martha was down, I think they would have had some fun.
Oh yeah.
100%.
100%. But you're right. It was so important that she was like, "Girl, what's between your legs is one thing, but what's between your mind, that's the important thing." And then
And
the other guy teaching her like what suffering is and basically
yeah,
bursting her bubble in this very dramatic way.
so dramatic. She is so dramatic. And that was one of the best parts. But like, yeah, Jared Carmichael's Harry is an important like reality check
Hmm.
because she's so naive, even at this
Yes.
point. She doesn't understand how it works. She spent most of her time in lavish bedrooms having sex.
Yeah.
That
or
that
being
was her.
doted on and just observed and like let and the world was her, rat maze situation. They just
Her
wanted to see
pleasure
what she would
dome,
do. Yeah.
just wherever she goes. But and the that whole situation with like the brothel and Catherine Hunter's, was it Madame Swiney,
Yeah.
who kept biting her.
I know.
And like that whole entire dynamic was so interesting, and that little old lady had a lot of tattoos.
I was gonna say, if Max is king, she is queen.
Which, and like that whole entire sequence of like, this is where the film I would expect to push a lot of people's buttons, because there's
Mhm.
very graphic sex scenes with a lot of kinks going on.
Yes.
Even the moment where like some guy brought his two kids to learn about sex, and the best part is the one just like, and the other one's like writing all
Yes.
the notes along the way. And where, because like up to that point, like Bella seemed perfectly happy with the sex that she was getting from Duncan, seemed very pleasurable. And then she experienced having sex with a bunch of other men and who she didn't find attractive, she didn't have a connection with. And that whole entire sequence, I just feel like is dating,
Yeah.
like capturing the unfortunate existence that is dating and
And
going,
it's so existential too, because like she witnesses, I feel like it's so interesting how she's shown like abject suffering and
uh,
then she like walks into like a whorehouse,
yeah,
and then is like, I want a job, and it's like so utilitarian and like so divorced from like what it really is. But she does have to, even when she is approaching it in her Bella way, like there is pain and there's like awkwardness and just all these things that I just feel like she encounter, like the way that she handles each of them is so, again, inspired, because like I think about the moment when she tells the joke, she does the joke and the memory or whatever, and it's
mhm.
like, again, you're taking something that should be demeaning, but you are inserting your agency into those interactions. And yeah, there's like every scene of this movie, like I just have thoughts. It's so intentional. Everything is so intentional.
And what's so fascinating about this is um the book was written by a man. The
Mm-hmm.
screenplay is adapted by a man, and this is directed by a man. And it's still able to be very there and blunt
Yeah,
and raw with everything,
yeah,
and giving that kind of perspective. And I feel like if you didn't have the right lead here, you wouldn't buy into this. But Emma
right.
Stone is so great. What a long way she's come from like Zombieland and Easy A to
Well, when I was talking to my dad on the way home, he was like, I recognize that actress kind of, but I don't think I know her from much. And I'm like, well, you know what, Dad? That's fair because she's mostly been in like cutesy stuff until like, she then started like recently, last like 5 or so years, like taking on some pretty challenging roles. Like The Favorite is a fantastic
yeah,
example.
because like it was La La Land that I feel like really put her in a
Mm-hmm.
different kind of trajectory, and like
Mm-hmm.
her getting like awards consideration. Then she was Billie Jean King in Battle of the Sexes, really like that. And then The Favorite, because that was 2016, 2017, 2018. And then she started branching off and doing all these other kinds of things. Like she came back for like Zombieland and like The Croods and Cruella and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
between this and The Curse that she's in on Showtime, she's doing some really interesting and different kinds of things. There's a long shot from like The Help. and playing Gwen Stacy in Spider-Man. And
Right.
like apparently she kept dyeing her hair blacker and blacker and blacker. And Yorgos Lanthimos is like, you could stop now. But like it went full blown, like pitch black.
Her
And
hair is also kind of a character in this movie. Like it
well,
is
that's
kind of
big
its own character.
because it keeps growing, and that's how we know how much time has passed. Because they
Yes.
specifically drop exposition to tell us it grows like an inch every 2 weeks or something like that. And we see how much time has passed. Um, Speaking of like hair and makeup, the makeup job they did on Willem Dafoe is so incredible
Yes.
and creating this very specific looking character because like Willem Dafoe is one of the most unique looking actors to begin with,
Yes.
and then they just doubled down and just had this like giant Jay Leno chin that he
Yeah.
had and everything.
There's like a
And
tiny bit of body horror there, but it's so effective for
well,
the
and that's the
whole
thing
thing.
too, like there's some like Cronenberg ish kind of like weird body element kind of stuff going on in this film.
Yeah. The
And
carriage killed me. Like knocked me out. I was laughing for like so many minutes. I just kept picturing someone inside the carriage with the coconuts because it still made the sound even though there were no hoofs.
exactly. And just how this film goes from like the black and white and everything at the
Yeah.
beginning, and then effortlessly goes into some of the most rich, beautiful color filmmaking
Hmm.
you're gonna find. It just this was something else. Like there's it's gonna be so hard pressed to find a film quite like this. And this this is my number three film of this year. And I've seen like 780. So like that's saying something. But like if this winds up with like if this were to win Best Picture, it would make me so happy because it's reinforcing what like Everything Everywhere All at Once did last year, that
Yes.
film has so much potential
Hmm.
to just keep making like run of the mill straightforward kinds of films. And this is so bold and so out there and so ridiculous. And Yorgos Lanthimos is so good at that. It just makes me so happy that this man makes movies and makes them
Yeah.
so weird. And here's the thing, this is the first one of his that I've fully loved because, like, his early, like, Dogtooth, like one of his early films, is an experience. It
Hmm.
is so Greek and so him too. The lobster loses me towards the end.
Yeah.
Killing of a
That's a
Sacred
weird one.
Deer, I don't even know how to feel still, and I watched this movie in theaters. And there are some aspects of the favorite, like the favorite was getting there. And I'm like, okay, I can see where you're going here. And then this one just solidified that he is so capable of creating some of the most unique, bold, and interesting films out there. And it makes me so happy that somebody is. Because, like,
Yeah.
there's certain filmmakers, like, I loved Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer should not have worked. This is a
Hmm.
3 hour R-rated biopic about a guy who invented the atomic bomb. But if it weren't for Christopher Nolan, it would just feel like any other 3 hour biopic that just, hits the beats, but it felt so uniquely Christopher Nolan.
Hmm.
And it's like those are the filmmakers that I love. And like I'm a huge Kubrick fan. He was a piece of shit, like as a human being, but like what he was able to create in every single one of his films was like this is what film should be about, being able to
Yeah.
create something so uniquely and different. And there's a lot of Kubrickian things about Yorgos Lanthimos' filmmaking.
Hmm.
He has to be a fan of Stanley Kubrick in some shape or form. I remember watching The Favorite and just being like, I see a lot of things. And and just that boldness to not shy away from anything.
I was
This
just gonna
movie,
say, no punches are pulled, none.
this movie
Everything
is
is like all the
so bold.
way.
It's just like Emma Stone's gonna be there completely naked doing some weird stuff, and
Yes,
it happens.
yes.
And it doesn't shy away from being very upfront about its themes. Because here's the
Mhm.
thing, there's a lot of fragile people out there, and there's probably a lot of fragile people who will get very upset about this movie.
Yes,
And my
yes,
response to them is, you are so missing out.
yeah,
And it's just, there's so many things to open your eyes to about this film and to really think. And that's the thing. I love science fiction. The best science fiction is something that's going to make you think, along with the pew pew and all
yeah.
the fun sci-fi crazy elements of it. And that's what science fiction's about. Like 2001: A Space Odyssey isn't just a 2 hour and 20-minute thing about a killer robot. There's so much to unpack there. And there's so much to unpack here. And which is why, like,
Hmm.
this film is just going to be sitting in here,
Percolating.
just, and, when I get around to doing my Oscar movie marathon before my Oscar party, I'm really hoping that this gets voted as one of the movies people want to watch because 100% this has to be nominated for Best Picture. I think that's a shoe-in. This,
Yep.
Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, those are shoe-ins. Like,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure they have to. Like, I think this got nominated for like a record number of Critics' Choice Awards. I think like 12 or something
Hmm.
crazy like that because it's that good. So,
And it's that like challenging because just like you said, I mean, things should make you think. I understand that there are people out there who don't want to consider these things. It's not like, I
mhm,
mean, I think it's fun. I'm a bog standard liberal arts nerd who delights in like hashing out these conversations and thinking about it. But really, like it is, I think the themes are they are applicable to everybody. And that I think is what will make people want to turn away because it's like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to face that. Like that's too weird. It's like this is in many ways, it's not the human experience. It's an ideal depiction of what the human experience could be if
mhm,
we were all sort of divorced from, you know, our upbringings and all these constructs in a way that we've only been able to depict it being possible if you were created as a monster by a monster. Because let's be honest, in many ways, Willem Dafoe's character is his own monstrosity, but that gives him the ability to give her a lot of things he didn't have.
mhm.
It just, it's like there's, yeah. I could write so many essays that no one is asking for.
I will read them.
I know you would, Shane.
And I also want all the crazy animals, like the
Yes.
hybrid animals and stuff like that. That's what Godwin was doing in this place is something else.
It's beyond right and wrong. It's just that, like, again, it exists in a different world. You have to
Mhm,
completely change everything you accept. Because, like, you notice in this whole conversation we've had, we've never asked ourselves, was he right to do what he did? Like, that's not even part of it. It's not.
mhm.
It's not.
And it's
It's
that
about
like,
what happens next.
well, and what's so interesting is he gave this woman a chance to live a life that she was never going to be allowed to have.
Yeah.
And it's
That
all
no
through,
one would have been allowed to have.
no, it's all through some pretty sketchy, quote unquote, science and medicine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but this is a special film, and you all should go check it out. Thank you, Disney, as this is a Searchlight Pictures. So
Look,
technically Disney.
They're the money, they're not the thought, they're not the
No.
inspiration.
And let's be real, this is a Searchlight Pictures. This was like Fox kind of making these decisions and Fox people making these decisions. They just happen to be owned by Disney at this point.
Yeah,
But so you all should go out to the theater and show some love for Poor Things after watching Wonka for the fifth time. Because that seems to be what's going on right now at the box office. But Haley, thank you so much for coming on and chatting Poor Things.
absolutely. Thank you. And everyone, I hope you enjoy it. Just again, go with your friends, not with your parents.
Yes. Do not go with your parents.
Do not go
But
with your
thank all of
parents.
you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.